welcome everyone to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are available in podcast form. Find them at artistfirst.com. And now here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, D-Man. And tonight, we have a wonderful announcement. We are changing the name of the show.
What?
It's becoming the Wherever You Go, There You Are hour. No, we will never change the name of the show because it came to me in a dream. It was a horrible dream. I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And you're Margaret. And wherever you go, there you are.
Indeed.
And that is that's the topic tonight. And it's a funny line that, is a truism or a tautology, because that's just a fancy word for a truism. But wherever you go, there you are. And sort of the corollary is that, if you're seeking happiness or seeking to find yourself, many times people will relocate, or they'll seek, like a paradisical spot or some sort of nirvana, or Shangri-La, or whatever, this sort of place where everything is wonderful. But yet, when they get there, and sometimes this can be a metaphor for all kinds of things, when you attain what you think will make you happy, or what you think will make you fulfilled and satisfied, oftentimes you aren't. And the reason being is that you are still you. You wherever you go, however far you've gone to seek out your happiness, first of all, that doesn't change who you are necessarily. It can, but if in fact your dissatisfaction with your situation or with yourself is rooted in something which is not external, then no amount of relocation, you will always still be there wherever you go. and we all, it's funny because we all know people, or maybe we have ourselves, sort of thought, well, if I could only go X, Y, Z, or get to this part of this certain pinnacle in my career or whatever, then I'll be happy. Everything will be wonderful. And if you're honest with yourself, it's never about that. Go ahead.
That's the phrase. If you're honest with yourself, I think half the time, more than half the time, is in delusion.
There's a whole show there, if you're honest with yourself. Sometimes we come up with a theme for the next show at the beginning of this show. We're not going to change horses in midstream here. But in fact, self-honesty or self-examination is probably the first step that very few people actually do. They conceive that they are unhappy, or that, as Coley would say, it's an unhappiness of the mind. The mind says, I'm not happy here, or whatever it is that I feel is going to make me happy is not within my grasp, And the unhappiness of the mind begets the mind to come up with a solution, or rather prompts the mind to come up with a solution. And oftentimes the mind will hand you a convenient, well, if you only did, or if you only had, or if you only went, or if you only attained, so the mind has this nice little closed loop of, we're not happy, but if you listen to me and do the things, then we will get the deal. And the heart sits there either below or in the middle or at your core and says in a whispering way, no, wherever you go, the brokenness or the unhappiness which is in your heart will still be there. You'll still be you.
Right. The being able to be frank and honest with yourself is the first step, because the mind wants to take hold, and if you're unhappy, it basically wants you to listen to me. I'll tell you why you're unhappy.
Right, and have
as opposed to listening to yourself, saying, "I feel unhappy. Why? What is this unhappiness that I'm feeling?" I'm exploring it so that you know, well, am I sad? Am I disappointed? Am I let down? Am I, you begin to go through and take stock internally of what you're really feeling. But the interesting part is mind likes to step in and say, no, let me tell you why you're unhappy, because I figured it out.
Right.
Okay? And there's a part of you, especially when you're young, you're like, well, okay, I'll listen because I don't know. You hadn't come to the point where you were internal enough to be able to distinguish the exact feelings that are arising. And you have to take time with that to become familiarized with yourself, how your reaction rose. What does it actually feel like? Why was I so disappointed in that? There was no real reason, but what was behind it all?
I think that's exactly right. And I think oftentimes, you mentioned people who are young, people are set up for these situations in a very well-meaning way when you're young, usually when you're, let's say, middle grammar school age. People will start saying to you, well, what do you want to be? Or what do you want to do? And if there's sometimes even if there's the slightest hesitation, they will give you, they say, well, you should be X or Y or Z, and you'll have A or B or C. And the implication is that you're not, or you're lacking, or you haven't proved yourself worthy or in any way, useful, or whatever that term means, and that you're seeking. You're saying, well, what would I don't know what I want to do. I'm kind of open. That is somehow discouraged, and you're given this kind of external goal, which can become an internal goal. It can become internalized, and the mind loves that. It latches right onto it and says, well, we have to do X, Y, Z, and A, B, C, and go to this college and this school and get this degree and do these things, and this elusive kind of, and then you'll be happy, and you'll find who you are and your purpose is ever receding. But it's sort of set up. It's given to you early on, perhaps when you're young, a little bit impressionable, a little bit unsure, and set up for this mental kind of treadmill.
Right. Well, also it's dependent upon your environment as well, and the culture you're raised in.
Yeah.
What is expected of you.
Well, isn't that a phrase that's fraught with many things? Yes, exactly.
What is expected of you.
Expected. Go ahead.
Well, in a family, that is the setup. You begin to understand the dynamic of what it means to be a child and interacting with an authority figure of some kind within a family. One of the first things you learn is who's the boss, who's running the show. And it was very interesting to me. I just remember when I was little recalling that, well, I'm being told what to do by mom or nanny all the time. So I'm supposed to do that. But then they defer to dad or Papa. So you watch that like, oh, okay, why? Why is that going on? And what I always thought was fascinating is that they're trying to make a decision, and inevitably it was always mom or a nanny who decided what was going to happen, as opposed to who they were deferring to. I always thought that was fascinating.
Well, to abstract that's great, because in essence, the second part of the phrase that we were going with today, because we have this boss graphic which will be up on the website soon. Wherever you go, there you are, and the other phrase is people are always trying to find themselves, but who told you were lost? And that's part of it. There is who, in probably with the best of intentions, your family, your authority figures. They tell you you're lost, or they tell you that you're not. They kind of implant the seed of discontent within you, or this idea that whatever you currently are is not finished or complete, that it's lacking something, that you, as sort of a potential thing, could be so much more, and until you get to the more, you won't have fulfilled your purpose or something. It's very vague and nebulous, because that's how it's presented. It's given as sort of this sort of nebulous, well, you want to be something someday, don't you? And you take it in. You mentioned that there's the authority figures, the whether it's a mother or a father figure, but these are the vehicle of this sort of continuing cycle of telling people, young people especially, that they aren't something yet. And it denies the beingness of you. You are a complete being. That isn't to say that achievement, or that tremendous work, or that a purpose isn't part of all the things that you do, but these are addenda, or facets of an already perfect gem, which is you, the being you. You have tremendous potential to do many things, but wherever you go, there you are. You, the being that was incarnate, are the same being. And what Wotole says is that this mental kind of spin, which is kind of pushed on you initially, and then you kind of internalize and pick up and turn into your own mental spin, layers upon layers upon layers of the being, the you that is right there, that is at the root of it all.
Well, I think the environment that you're in, and I've noticed this with families, some families are oriented towards achievement. You must achieve something. Some families are oriented towards you must be happy.
Yes, it's true.
And that brings a whole different focus into things, because you can in both scenarios, they can be pushing you to go do something all the time. Go do something to achieve something. Go do something to be happy.
Yes.
Okay. And that's where the break is. It's not going to do something to achieve or do something to become happy. You have to become. In other words, you have to be first. And exploring that is something that gets bypassed very quickly for a lot. The state of being, especially when you're young and you're trying to explore things. I love it when kids are playing, because that is the best, fastest expression of learning right there. And to maintain that, I think that's the trick, is to be able to maintain that level of learning. Now, people say, they've done studies, oh, well, it slows down. This is the fastest moment that that a human being begins to learn. Fastest rate of learning is when you are in this young infant and child stage. But I would beg to differ. I think it has a lot to do with you being shifted from your being state to focusing on doing, whether it is for achievement or happiness. And I think when you are focused in your being state, you learn at a rate that spins the mind, because you're doing the full experience of what it is to be human and taking it all in, because you're engaging all of you at that point. Especially when you're an infant, it's overload for these little guys. They have to nap. I've had enough of you people.
I feel that way all the time. Go ahead, sorry.
But then you should nap.
I kind of just get a blank stare. Kind of the same thing. Go ahead,
well,
sorry.
If you notice when the little one is over stimulated, they go into the zone, as we call it. They give you that blank stare. It's like turn off for an instant or two.
Yeah.
Because it's too much.
Too much.
And that's got to be the notification that, okay, I'll pull back a little, overload. And I think that awareness is not brought to the attention of families in general. Being able to teach the little ones that there is a point where it is overwhelming and you must pull away to take the break, to be able to recover. If you do this constantly, you eventually get to a point where it's not just the adrenals being burned out, but it's a point of pain. Point of pain. I wouldn't be surprised if overwhelm is the base reason for a lot of addictions.
Yeah. I agree. I think going a little far afield, but you're right. But the to come back to the learning or the being state, which we all have, which we all were born into as part of our natural state, is a state where you can absorb tremendous amounts of information, and you need to. But the layers of it's almost like we're given a certain period of time. This, they call it the innocence of childhood. Maybe 4 or 5 years where there aren't these kind of, well, you should be something. There's just no. It's enough that you just are. I'm hungry, I eat. I'm tired, I nap, or whatever. Each new little day is a universe in and of itself.
Right. And
closing your eyes and waking up is like a whole brand new universe. We're starting from
again.
And this is a wonderful time. We drag ourselves and we drag our children out of it into the world of the eyes-centered, what are you going to be, with that phrase. And it's a very well-meaning. I don't want to say that we're in any way doing this for the wrong reasons. We're doing it for what appear to be the right reasons, but we sacrifice a tremendous amount. The mind is, in human beings, in animals in general, there is a being state. We all know that our pets and our animals are beings. They exist. They are incarnate souls and spirits. But they don't have this incredibly, they have a mind certainly, but they don't have this incredibly powerful ego mind that is very apt to deny being. The ego mind lives in the future, in the past, in the unknowable, in the fantasy, in all these wonderful states, which none of which are being states. They're all ego states. And it's so facile and so quick to process and synthesize and give a new motivation and a new expression, and don't again get me wrong, it is quintessentially human and part of our existence, but it is kind of pushy. The mind is a pushy thing. It tries to push everything else away and say, I am all. And we all know it. We know when the mind is taking over, because it turns into a slave master on your being.
Right. Well, it wants to take over completely.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't want to be part. It wants to be all. The original megalomaniac.
Yes.
And it's understanding that that tendency is there, to recognize the fact there's part of you that wants to be in control in terms of planning and thinking about it and considering things, because it's in its own purvey. It wants, this is what I can control. It loves control.
Loves it. Lives for it.
So when you recognize the fact that your mind does this, every mind does this, and it's a tendency that we're born with as humans, make room for that and understand that, it can't be in charge all the time. For the good of the whole being, it cannot be in charge all the time. It's like you have a recalcitrant child in the family, and you have to help teach the child, this is not good for the entire family. Doing what you want to do all the time is not good for the entire family. And the interesting part about that is it doesn't always believe it.
Well, I would say it almost never does.
So trying to begin to bridge that is an interesting exercise. How aware are you when this part of you rears its head?
Right.
Do you give over? Are you capable of being able to rein it back? Or is it so rebellious that it just throws it all to the wind and says, no, I'm going to take a fit now because you're not listening to me?
Well, there's two things there. I love that you brought that up, because it's true, it doesn't want to listen, but it's also reinforced tremendously by the external, by the society at large, which is the echo chamber of the mind. Our whole society, and just to take, to pick on social media, is all about the mind. It's all about the echo chamber of do, go, achieve. You're not happy. And the mind loves that. Everything we do in the society at large is about the future and the past and what could happen and all this, and it's all built on top of the mind. People need these, there's that phrase it's not phrase, but that sort of movement where people go for these forest baths, or they go to the beach and just stare at the ocean, or they go there, and what they're looking for is the respite from the mind, is to go back to being, even for a second. I mean, Tolle says, you just have this amazing, this just stop thinking for just a femtosecond, and there's this wonderful peace and relax and release. And of course, he would say that you want to encourage that and try to have more of these being states, because, as you said, it becomes a constant. It becomes bad for the body. If you said the body is the family, this one recalcitrant child is trying to run the whole body and the rest of the being to its frenetic drum. Go, bang, do. And one of the drum beats that it beats the hardest is, you're not happy until you do these 500 things, and I'll number them and put them in alphabetical order for you. And those 500 things, or whatever they are, affect, who will I marry? Who will I become in a relationship with? Where will I live? How will I? all these, it becomes lists or criteria or expectations or it didn't come out the way I wanted it to, and so now I'm not happy. These spider webs of ego really become crushing bands of ego that strangle the being, and really more than strangle, they suffocate. They give the being no air and no place to just be. Now, please realize, people, that wherever you go, no matter what the mind does, the being is indestructible. It's there. The mind can't do anything without it. It just tries to pretend it can. And the being is so incredibly powerful that when it does want to assert itself, the mind has to obey. The mind will tell you otherwise, but it's not true. The being is you. It is the piece of you which is indestructibly, immodifiably you. The mind wants to deny it and cover it up and give it 5,000 things to do. When the being asserts itself, the mind quiets. And that, wherever you go, there you are, is not just a tautology or something funny. It actually is wherever you are, wherever you live, for the whole totality of your life here in this incarnation, there you are. You're just being told by the mind.
One point I'd like to bring up is, when we sleep, people think that, well, the body's tired, it's got to sleep. The truth of the matter is, it's not the body that's really tired. The mind has to turn off.
Yes.
That is what they have found scientifically. The mind has got to turn off, go into that REM mode, because if it's on too much, they found that studies that you will make a person go crazy if the mind is on constantly.
Yes.
So I think of it in terms of that mind that you are using, that you have cobbled together in all these random thought patterns as well as emotional responses, is a big stressor. So whenever you are conscious, and that is, or awake, and that is running around, you're running around someplace, and you feel stressed, realizing that it's you. Your body is fine. You're feeling tired, not because of the body, but because of your mind.
And interestingly enough, too, you mentioned that the mind needs more. It needs sleep far more than the body. The being, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but these yogis who practice quieting the mind can go to the point where the mind is completely tamed, and the body needs almost nothing.
Yeah.
It doesn't experience fatigue. It doesn't experience thirst or hunger. Of course, your physical body needs some things. It needs
sustenance.
Sustenance. It needs water. But the being which comes out is the indestructible piece, the piece that never needs rest. It's always there. Wherever you go, there it is. And it is the mind which kind of wears itself out.
Right.
And you know what? Let's
yeah.
We've worn out this half hour.
I see.
So let's take a mind break, go back to the studio, listen to a couple of commercials, and we'll come back and we'll talk more about wherever you go, there you are.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There Is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief, Dev, is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side, as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
The Timeless Esoterica radio program with Dr. Bruce is broadcast on the 4th Monday of every month at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern on ArtistFirst.com. We explore topics including the paranormal, alien life, mysteries, conspiracies, hidden history, oddities, and much more. Each show will feature a special guest with exciting and thought-provoking discussion. Always keep an open mind, an open heart, live forever, and remember Dr. Bruce believes in you.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lyons is Book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time.
We're glad wherever you are listening to this broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman. All past shows are available in podcast form. Pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And there you go. Thank you, Scott. And tonight we are talking about wherever you go, there you are. Or wherever you are, there you go. In fact, the first half hour we talked a little bit about that phrase, which is a funny phrase, the wherever you go, there you are, because it seems trite. It seems like it's like a solipsism or some sort of tautology, but yet the truth of it, like all tautologies, is somewhat obvious, but it's also somewhat profound, because the key here is wherever you go, there you are. You is a being word, you be. The identity of the being has its own completeness. It is all of you. It is always there. Yet the mind, and we've talked about this a lot in the last half hour, layers on all the I states, the what you could do and when you could do it and how you did it and why you didn't do it and all the things you don't have and all the things you do have and blah 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 blah, and spins you a huge sticky web of illusion. The mind is many times, because of its power, dealing in illusory things. It deals in illusory futures. It deals in immutable pasts. It deals in could-be's and what-ifs and might-have-beens. Because the mind, it has an amazing facility to imagine and to plan and to game things out and to try and figure out what's going to happen next. Now, why? It's a crazy great thing, because we can do so much planning and so much logistics and understanding and trying to figure stuff out and exploring our universe, and it's great, but it unfortunately leads to a lot of unhappiness at the being state level if it's out of balance. We all know people who have spent their whole lives sort of trying to find themselves, when the obvious but yet unacceptable answer is you're already there. You are you, and you're kind of lying to yourself about that you're not you, or that you're somehow going to be a different you if you're in Maui.
Mm-hmm. I like to look at that particular phrase as wherever you go, you are there.
Yes.
And you can play with that a couple different ways. You can focus on the you and how you define yourself. You can focus on the fact that any place you go, it's you. So that understanding, if you accept the fact, because you've got to accept that fact, because there is a thought that, well, if I change my location, I'm going to change too. I'm changing my mirror, so I should be able to see other things, of me, a better me. But a mirror is a mirror. You may change the frame, which is pretty much what you do when you change location, but the mirror itself is still you. So why are you running from yourself?
Yes. People run from themselves, or they you mentioned a mirror, and I think that we mentioned earlier in the last half hour about introspection and understanding who you are. I think the unfortunate thing about the mind's spider webs of illusion is you start to live in them, and then you start to believe them, and then you start to not to like the actual you. You'd like to be the chimera. You'd like to be the illusion. And oftentimes people hide what they're running from is the actual discovery of who they are. There is a certain core realization of this truth, that wherever you go, there you are, and that people understand that nothing actually changes themselves. Nothing actually you're immutable. You are a being. This isn't to say that you can't act one way or act another way, or that you can't be a good or bad or a different decider of what and who and how you do. But the being that is you is immutable. And unfortunately, people become afraid of looking in the mirror, in the actual mirror. They want to look into the illusory, soft, gauzy, dressed up, different frame. The filter. We mentioned last half hour a little bit about social media. Well, social media is the realm of the mind, and it is the realm of the filter, of the this is who I want you to think I am, which is even better.
I believe that it has a lot to do with the story that you're telling yourself.
Oh, yes.
Because you want to embrace the story that you're telling yourself. And you believe that there are certain, how do I say this, especially if you're achievement-oriented.
Mm.
You believe that there are certain landmarks or hurdles that have got to be hit before you can be satisfied with your story. The other way of looking at it, too, is that if you're more happiness-oriented, the belief that you have to go do something, and when you do that, then that will bring a level of happiness. And if that doesn't happen, then you're still unhappy with your story because you believe that doing this will bring me happiness. And it's a reverse ways of kind of trying to find yourself, because you begin to realize that in that doing, or whether it's achieving something or believing you're achieving happiness, because I guess they're both achieving something. You're aiming for achievement. You're not in that state of actually writing your story, being there, reflecting in the moment, understanding that you are experiencing what's going on around you. You're telling yourself a story about what is going on around you, as opposed to being in it and experiencing what it is.
So many great points there. I mean, the story you're saying, it's basically the narrative. That's the great word everyone uses. And what is a narrative? A narrative requires a narrator and someone to listen. And I believe the reason that people are writing their stories rather than living their stories is they'd like to tell their story to someone else, so that in someone else's eyes, in the eyes of the reflected beholder, I am different. I am covered in the story me, the made-up me, the social media me.
I think that description is something that happens when you're younger, because you need that. You need to be able to tell somebody what you're seeing, and they will affirm you or gently show you, different ways to look at it, to broaden your worldview. Because as a young one, you're not exactly sure exactly what the world is. Frankly, I'm not sure if I know what the world is at this point. But when you're young especially, you are looking for that. And I wonder if that hasn't been a foundational part of your upbringing. Are you always looking for that?
That's also a good point. I mean, certainly there are uses for narrative, in the sense that you use it to affirm your perceptions. But I believe when you, instead of living as a being and then sharing an experience and using, of course, a vehicle to share the experience with another, and then hearing their affirmation, this is a good interaction. This is a good way of interacting and sharing that energy together, because we aren't singular people. We aren't singular beings. We aren't. We need the relationship. We need to use our stories to share with one another. But I believe when narrative becomes toxic, and when it becomes this sort of endless mind spin, is when the narrative isn't told to anyone but yourself. When you're narrating your life to yourself, I believe it becomes almost psychotic. You push yourself out into not a being, but a character in a narrative, which is a is a story which you're telling yourself. The cat is telling us a story right now. The story that you're telling yourself is not you. But yet if your mind pushes you hard enough, you can turn into that story and you lose yourself. This is another thing. Well, who told you were lost? Sometimes you tell you that you're lost. You know?
No, seriously.
Yeah.
Because you've come to a point where you think you've got certain things to judge things by. You know, like we said, if it's achievement, you've got to do these things, or if it's happiness, you've got to do these other things. And you think you're able to judge where you're at, not making space for the fact that you are learning and you may not know exactly where you're at or what's going on. So making space for that is something that you have to culture, because the society encourages you to put on a certain face and then act a certain way. You're putting on a persona as opposed to who you actually are. And that's where the dissonance begins to set up. You want to decide your persona as opposed to saying, well, no, at my core, I really, love food. Certain food.
Well, right, and I think there's certainly a good sort of knowing who you are, a good sort of introspection, a good sort of sharing your story with another to also learn more about them and about who you are. The losing yourself is, I believe, when you write yourself into the narrative, not as an experiencer, but as an actor. We talked about this a few shows ago, where in essence, instead of living your life, you're acting out a play. It's almost like a story you tell yourself. Sometimes this happens to people when a certain event will happen. I found a blue pen on my chair. And they turn this into a whole narrative about how everyone in the office is out to get me because everyone knows how I hate having pens put on my chair. And it must be Susie, because Susie the other day mentioned something about pens and she laughed. And this is a whole made-up story, but yet people live in those stories. Tolle says, we live in these narratives or in these illusions about this guy did this, and he must be out to get me, and that means that he thinks I'm bad, and I think he's bad, and now I hate him so very much, and I'm never going to talk to him again. Well, this guy was just like picking lint out of his toenails and had no idea who you are or why you're there, but yet you've made up this passion play, plugged in everyone in the nearby environment into it. Ascribed everyone motives, including yourself, and reactions, and then you're living in it. It's no longer you, the being. It's you, the made-up you in the story that you're telling yourself. It's no longer anybody else that's in reality. It's all the illusory people with illusory motives. So this becomes a chimera of real experience, a denial of being. And you can waste tremendous amounts of energy here, and people do. And they spin up emotions, and then emotions on top of emotions, right?
It's just the stress levels are through the roof. And it's you doing it to you. And that's a hard one to show people, that you're actually doing this to you, especially if there is not a objective viewpoint that that person can slip into. They're trapped in the ongoing narrative of the mind.
Yes.
And I do mean trapped. You have to make the decision that you will no longer be trapped there.
Yes.
It's a conscious thing. I mean, otherwise, it's all unconscious, and you don't know why this is all happening the way it is.
I mean, I mentioned him a couple times, but that's exactly, again, what Tolle says. In essence, you lose yourself in these stories, and that phrase that we had, "Who told you you were lost?" is because you've internalized the narrative. You tell you over and over again that you are lost, that you are beset by all these troubles, and can't be happy, and everyone's out to get me, and I believe the only thing that gets you out of it eventually is you almost have to burn yourself down to the point where it's like, if I don't stop this, I'll go mad. You know.
Well, you have to get to the point where the mind isn't talking anymore.
Yes.
And that's why you have all these, people are trying to quiet the mind, or, the different natural sounds, or drugs.
Yes.
But, a thought just occurred to me. That scenario where the mind just sort of takes over and begins to tell a story without really taking stock of what's actually going on, and anticipating all these things that are going to happen, adding stress upon stress upon stress. Isn't that the original sin in the garden?
Could be, yes.
Well, when you think about it, I mean, they did something wrong, and then they had to run and hide because they're telling themselves this whole narrative of, this is all super, super bad.
Right.
Couldn't they just said, "We did this. We're sorry."
Yes.
Wouldn't that have taken care of things?
Well, I mean, if you go back to the actual story, Adam is the one that makes up the first story. Well, the woman gave it to me.
That's right.
And then the woman says, the serpent kind of talked me into it. And the serpent loses the whole thing because he's like, what? I was just, he gets whacked on the head. No, I mean, but yes.
My point being, we were in a state of fullness and grace. We were in contact with all of us, ourselves, and comfortable.
A being state, yes.
Right. And then suddenly, you do this. And you know what's wrong. Well, if you stopped right there, as I said, and just fessed up and said, yeah, we screwed up bad, it would have changed everything. But what happens? The initial impulse is into the story. And if you read more about how the snake was seducing Eve into doing that, it was basically making her think and tell the story her way, as opposed to how she understood it was told to her originally.
And if we abstract this is the fall from grace, the fall from the garden, is a description of the mind taking away our innocence, the innocence of being, which we all experience at our creation into this world, at our incarnation into this world. We know we have a state of being and innocence, which the mind, and it's significant that it's called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Well, it could also have been called the tree of the mind, because the mind is all about good and bad, yes and no, right and wrong, what could happen, what could not. So the mind is a wonderful and a tyrannical thing at the same time.
It's the tree of the story.
It's the tree of the story. And as Shel Silverstein would say, it's the giving tree. It's the tree that gives you a pain.
It's continually giving you problems.
Stories. Well, I mean...
But that's the truth of it.
It's the truth of it.
It's the truth of it. When you have the knowledge of good and evil, you are always giving yourself a problem.
And yes, and what we really mean to say is that, we tell ourselves that we are lost, and we tell ourselves that we can be found, And we tell ourselves that if we do all these things in this particular order with this 7-step plan, that we'll get there. So a lot of this is unfortunately manufactured. And we through our experience of ourselves have to be wise enough to balance it out, to in essence admit that we aren't as powerful or as controlling or as all powerful, all ubiquitous as we think we are, that in fact our being states are ephemeral, and the most important moment of any time is now and now and now. And if you stay there, if you stay in this exact important moment of right now, the mind doesn't have a lot to do, because the mind says, well, I'm sorry, we're staying right now, and now is 99.9% of the time just fine. And then the mind goes, but, and you have to go, now just calm down. None of that's happening. It doesn't matter what happened last week. The future is unknowable. Let's talk about now. And the mind just goes crazy for a while, but if you teach it the balance that now is good, and yeah, maybe something bad will happen, but guess what? Now is good. We learned this. We were dropped into that pit of the cancer wards, and you had two choices. You could learn that, or you could drive yourself completely insane.
Yes.
And you learn that now is good because the future is inconceivable, and the past was a terrible thing, and you just leave them there. You say, bah, now is good.
You have no control. You see, the illusion by the mind is that it's telling you that if you do this, you have control.
Yes.
But when you are in an extreme condition, like in the pediatric cancer wards, you know you don't have control. Even though you are participating in whatever the planned chemo was or protocol is, you still don't have control. And you have got to get to the point where, in understanding that, you realize that you have got to shift into a larger state of being to handle what is unfolding in front of you. Because you need courage and fortitude, as well as hope.
And peace.
And to be able to get through.
To be able to get through. And you also learn, I believe, in those moments, and certainly in witnessing Christopher's struggle, that wherever you are, you can have happiness and peace and contentment under any circumstances. Up to the last breath, every now can be good and is good and is the state of where you are right now. It's a terrible thing to learn, but it's also the most amazing thing to learn.
Oh, it's a sublime thing to learn. And speaking of ends, I believe
it's sublime.
We have reached the end of our hour. So I'm Margaret.
And I'm Michael.
And thank you for listening.